Typically, Raworth also blurs certain boundaries. Is this a translation, or is this an original poem? And he also upsets certain hierarchies, so the precedence of the source poem over the translation, which is traditional. So in essence, Raworth gives you, Tim talked about methods of translation. There's a new method of translation here in the way which you could describe it in different ways. One way of describing it would say, Raworth says, translate a poem you know from a language you don't know. Having said that, I mean, to what extent does a poet know their own poems, and to what extent does Valway know the Tom Raworth poem? Anyway, in doing so, he gives us a translation which isn't a slavish translation of the original, but which, in Benjamin's phrase, gives what Benjamin called continuing life to the poem, which is one of the tasks of the translator in his essay. So he gives continuing life to original poem. And I think Raworth here does something which a lot of interesting translators are doing these days, which is a kind of metamorphic version of translation, or a prismatic version of translation, where the translation takes on many colours and goes in many different directions, and which takes translation in lots of genuinely experimental trajectories, and it expands on what we might traditionally consider translation to be. I think the work Tim was reading is relevant here. He mentioned biopic translation, which I was going to mention anyway. And also Harry Matthews, Up to Date, when he takes an old poem and makes it up to date, and writing practice techniques involving collage and erasure, and Oulipo, who have already been mentioned, have a lot of methods of translation that fit into this category. So S+7, which again has been mentioned, homophonic translation, which they use, but which has antecedents elsewhere, and definitional literature, which I came across in Oulipo, which he invented independently. So that means Oulipo talked of things that were invented before then, as anticipatory plagiarism of Oulipo. But in this case, Oulipo is an anticipatory plagiarism of Oulipo. Yes. Well, I have another poem to read, but I think everybody does, so I won't read that now if there's time.
So, Gazal, if you want to talk about a project. This project that I've done in translation was a project with envelopes that I designed, and wrote some poems in them in Persian, English, French, and German. And then I took the envelopes with me to Iran. Basically, some of them were just one page with only one line in it. Some of them were just longer poems. I took it to Lisbon, to London, to Tehran, and to Mexico. And I distributed the envelopes among people, wanted them to translate whatever they read on the page. So basically they were translating languages they didn't know. And I just wrote down about different experiences that I had in different countries. For instance, at Bentley College, where I exhibited the envelopes, people were not even willing to open the envelope and look inside, finding it very personal. In Iran, people wanted to participate in the translation more. Some people have translated it into drawing and pictures, and some people just added different papers into the envelope because I just wanted them to get on the paper. I also have the envelope written all around it, so sometimes just one line is translated to one full page poetry. So.
examples of it?
No, I don't. The big envelopes with paintings and words on it.
And were these people that you knew, or you just saw them in the street?
No, on different readings that I went to, I was reading in Lisbon, I just put it on different tables, people picked out, and then later I distributed envelopes among people. People sometimes exchange the envelopes with each other.
What was the strangest translation?
The strangest was actually the painting that had nothing to do with the text, because it was Persian text, and someone said, "Oh, here is what you say."
Do you remember the originals that you put in the
Well, the Persian text,
or have they also lost their originality, having all these different versions around?
yeah, they sometimes did, but some people actually were really accurate, because in Lisbon, someone translated all the German text exactly very accurate for the dictionary. That was strange too.
Why did you use envelopes? What was the idea? Because an envelope has this idea of sending message, but also envelope in musical terms.
Mhm. It was, for me, it was closest to a book, but I didn't actually think about sending it. If you were telling me that you actually send it over, but right now it's impossible because it's written all around the envelope. I can't send it now, but maybe I should have. Yeah, I was not thinking about sending it.
No, I'm saying sending was the idea that,
Yeah.
that writing is sending
Mm-hmm.
in terms of providing the message in one way or another.
It is, of course, yeah, a message that is inside the cover.
Mm-hmm.
You have to open it.
And it's interesting that in one place where you say you go, people don't dare to open the envelope.
Yeah,
And you go to other places where people really want
and even when you ask
cultural.
people to give it, you can open it, people find it, it's an envelope, so it's so personal.
There's something about culture.
Sure.
Okay. Shall we move to William?
It's a project I haven't done, so it's a virtual or, let's say, aspirational, as they say, translation. And it's based on a poem by an Argentinian called Nestor Ronga, who wrote a poem called Corpses in something like 1982, during the military dictatorship in Argentina, in which a lot of let's say, human beings were disappeared, so the corpses never appeared. So the idea of this poem, and it engages with that earlier discussion arising out of our talk, that is, either directness or not, complexity or not, in the political. We would never refer to the political. That's good poets. And what this guy does is to create this referent, which is corpses, which are not spoken of or seen in Argentina at that point. But he finds it sedimented in the language rather than pointing to describing the places where the corpses presumably are. So I'm just going to read a bit of a conventional translation and then say what it is I haven't done yet. And we never will. The corpses by Rwanda. Beneath bushes in scrub, on bridges, in canals, there are corpses. In the track of a train that never stops, in the wake of a ship that sinks, in a ripple that vanishes, on quaysides, railway halts, trampolines, piers, there are corpses. In fishermen's nets, in stumbling, in crab swamps, in she whose hair is pulled, with hair clasp hanging undone, there are corpses. In the necessity for this absence, in what underlines that speech, in your godly presence, Commander, in your line, there are corpses, etc. It's quite long. So, I had sometime, I can't remember when, read Jack Spicer's book called After Lorca, which is a very unconventional experimental translation. It includes letters written to Lorca long after Lorca died. Here's a bit. Things do not connect, they correspond. That is what makes it possible for a poet to translate real objects, to bring them across language as easily as he can bring them across time. That tree you saw in Spain is a tree I could never have seen in California. That lemon has a different smell and a different taste. But the answer is this: every place and every time has a real object to correspond with your real object. That lemon may become this lemon, or it may even become this piece of seaweed, or this particular color of grey in this ocean. One does not need to imagine that lemon, one needs to discover it. So the project is a non-dictionary based project where the referent that can't be seen or said, and it's not quite so obvious what that would be in the UK, is built out of the actual language and the actual, let's say, of the violence of the political in the UK. So it is built up. And it may have very little relation with the poem or not. I don't know, because I'm not Italian. But it occurred to me that that is actually without dictionary, without substitution in a way. Because what we're trying to do is rebuild the poem.
So with the correspondence that you're talking about, say for example, in the translation of the poem, the first poem you read,
Yeah.
where the corpses are, for example, in the wake of the ship.
Yeah.
The method would be to find some kind of correspondence in English contemporary situation to the wake of the sinking ship that would somehow refer to the ship or not refer to the ship. Like what exactly would you?
Well, I think that I take it that Colonga's poem, when it says in the wake of a ship, is actually taking us into the gap between a phrase and its reference, right into that gap, or whatever you want to call it, that abyss. Because the wake of a ship is a ready-made phrase. The ship's all over the place in the times. So it's not, imagine the wake of a ship where, there might have been a corpse thrown into the sea. It is getting to that, what do we call it, space, I don't like the word, gap between the word and its reference, which is precisely where the political operates. And also obviously experiment in poetry operates. And obviously Tim's method relies on that. But get into that gap, but get into it, let's say, if I could put it that way, the politics of language rather than the literary history of language. And I think it can be done. I don't think it's, but I'm not sure that, I mean, this came up when I didn't have much time on my hands, so maybe I will do.
In a sense, the description of it is a very interesting model, even without having it done. If you see what I mean. A kind of an essay-like thing without doing the actual.
Probably better that one,
Well, no, I don't know. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
And your description of it is extremely interesting. I just don't quite see how it would work.
No, that I can do.
If to make a filling gap would be like taking the corpses away.
Okay, so you have to preserve the gap, which I take it is in some way what Spicer is in some way. It's so slippery when you start to try to specify exactly what we're doing. I think, that's the quarrel I have with this. I mean, like, just to widen the discussion, this magnificent translation of Mallarmé by Peter Manson. He says it's a semantic translation, but for me, it's a magnificent piece of work. the actual work that Milanese phrases do is not.
Do you think about his other Malaga translation, English Malaga?
That's a different project.
Yeah.
It's all the sedimentations of English. That could be more interesting. This is interesting. Kind of proves the point that everybody's making. You don't get very far with this semantic approach. In other words, Mahomet is precisely the king or queen or whatever you want to call it, of the abyss, you know, between the word and whatever life is. Isn't it? There's a better one that sits on his right. Because he does put political stuff into his poems, but it's not at all. Strikes. Commemorations of the French Revolution. All that. So that was my second class.
So yeah, can we have time to wait to play some of us another poem? You want to
Can you
read?
fill that first?
Oh yeah, because yeah, okay.
Maybe I'll just talk about this one more than read it, because it echoes with Uganda,
Okay.
where Will does the translation and the gloss, and it's maybe I will read it. It's by one of my PhD students actually, a chap called Simon Everett, who's doing some brilliant work on translation. And he came to translate the Battle of Malden and move it off to Australia or something, but he spent his first 6 months translating from Mandarin, and he translated a poem by Yu Wanji, which has also been translated by one of other people, including Harry Chilwell. And it's called Poem for the Riverbank Willow, and the first stanza is: the jade of your gleam connects these barren banks, and fog blends myriad silhouettes into the highest pallor of buildings far off, and so it goes on. And a little bit like with Wills, he has another version of this poem which he calls an adset poem, and his adset poem is, the first version is trying to be quite a traditional translation, and the adset is about thoughts that go through the translator's mind as he translates it, so it's about the process of translation. Right? Here's a little bit of that, the adset version poem for the Riverbank Willow. More understated, row back the rhetoric, so that's a kind of instruction to himself. And paraphrase Marion Moore, the deepest feeling always shows itself in silence, not in silence but in restraint. And then it goes on. But I mean, I picked up for the reason that it seemed to me people often talk about, of course, something's always lost in translation. And it seemed to me a lot of interesting translation going on today makes a nonsense of that. That something is maybe found in translation, but also something new is created in translation. And that these poems, where there are two versions, kind of graphically illustrate that. But that is something which is there in an awful lot of interesting translation. So rather than something being lost in translation, you could talk of, maybe it's a bit crude to talk of something being gained in translation, but something metamorphosed, something new is created. And again, it takes me back to that phrase of Benjamin's giving continuing life. Or you could say that poems like this, by embracing that loss that is perhaps inevitable in translation, as it is inevitable in any language act, which produce multiple translations, is to say that translation is impossible. But by doing that, paradoxically you get richer translations that are full of multiplicity, metamorphosis, and possibility actually, rather than that old idea of not.
The Italian phrase translator, traitor, is much better. Translators, traitor.
Translator, trader.
Yeah.
modern translation could tell us another post. He mentions this very American word to dicker, D-I-C-K-E-R. Dickering, which is an old kind of Yankee slang for bartering. What's that the kind of centre of that kind of the idea? Exactly the translations are for trade, bartering, one thing for another. I think that was always in his mind when he was going through this.
It reminded me that when you said about the weirdest translation method, I got really bored from the comic translation method, so I tried to do a homophobic translation. I failed.
You got that?
Yeah, I started 3 lines in and I had to edit it. Hmm? It's in here somewhere, I can't remember where. Get back to you half an hour. Then, going back to Jack Spicer and after Lorca poems, there is this letter from Spicer to Lorca, but obviously Lorca was already dead, but it was the frantic, the spirit, the word of Lorca, or the timbre. And he writes this letter, says, when I translate one of your poems, and I come across words I do not understand, I always guess at their meanings. I am inevitably right. A really perfect poem, no one yet has written one, could be perfectly translated by a person who did not know one word of the language it was written. A really perfect poem has an infinitely small vocabulary. And there's this poem. It was one of the early raucous poems, which is found at the Little Square. And Spicer translates it as Song for September. And I'm just going to read a few verses. This is from Lorca himself. The children, why do they go so far from the little square? Myself, I go in search of magicians and of princesses. The children who showed you the path of the poets. Myself, the fountain and the stream of the antique sun. And Spicer translated this poem. In the distant night, the children are singing, a little river and a coloured fountain. The children, when will our hearts come back from your holiday? When my words no longer need you have left us here to sing the death of your summer, a little river and a coloured fountain. What September flowers do, you hold in your hand. Cole Swenson, a poet, mentions that in translation we should take into account time, music, because in the source language it's that thing that tells you the true texture of the word. And maybe timbre can be defined as the ability to produce overtones, that is, two meanings at the same time, or several meanings at the same time. So I feel that perhaps this is what Spicer's doing. This is interesting.
How are those overtones? What are they?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, but of course, again, yeah, the example I gave earlier of paco, the bird, paco is maybe it's just the same bird, but it has a completely different way of flying. So the overtones would be to take that bird in Spanish. And I don't know whether to transfer that into another language. It's translated and transferred is different languages, but to get the solve trading.
Sorry, no, go on. Just one more question. Albert?
Sure.
You said earlier when you talked the first time about how this reminded me is that birds, you know, birds versus oiseaux, for example, are different birds. And I wonder how you imagine that, or how does that, what's the sense of that to you? That the word in a different language actually, you see, is it a different signifier? A different mental image when it changes language, or are they doing that? So what would be, if you think of an English bird or a French oiseau, what kind of birds do you, or not you necessarily, but how would one visualize them differently?
Well, first of all, birds are similar animals to humans because we all have to learn the language. A bird cannot sing; they have to hear sing. So I feel that there is perhaps the perfect metaphor of the word flying, being free. But to me, I suppose it's the sound of the word very much, and not so much the image it portrays, but the voice it portrays. There was this poet at the beginning, and there was someone doing some research on the oral poetry and talking about birds. And he said, listen to you, talking to the researcher, these are birds. To me, they are voices in the forest. So you hear voices and a pattern. It's a different landscape, different countryside. And again, Lorca, for instance, he wrote 6 poems in Elysium. He didn't speak Elysium, but he was so taken by the landscape of that part of Spain that he wanted to be Gallego. So he learned the language and wrote 6 poems. Well, I think it's basically it's just to fall in love. So people get madly into that area, and then you can transform.
French oiseau also has a man with a gun called the Fifth. They shoot a lot of birds.
There's also regional dialects to bird language. They've taken a bird from the south of England and brought it up north, and that bird was attacked by other birds of the same species up north because it spoke a different language. Yeah.
I want to just add a bit on this. We're talking about self-translation as well, like you mentioned. Yeah, I read myself like in 2 or 3 languages, I think 3, and I don't normally self-translate myself because I think that every language has its own project. But there was this poem that I wrote once in Catalan, but I thought it would be better in English somehow. And when I translated it into English, I found myself improving it, so editing. And I guess like lots of us, if you write poetry, sometimes you edit yourself. But I just edited it when I translated it. And I thought, how curious. I'm going to translate it again back to Catalan and see if I can improve it. And I did that many times, like I did like 6 versions of it, because I thought maybe at the end I'm going to get to this perfect poem. But it never happened. Or I don't know, it's up to, I guess, the reader, because I'm reading it now, I prefer the first one. So I'm lost, like, and as editing and translating at the same time, it's a translation in itself.
What happened to the length of it? Is it
It changes well, like it changes more like the length, but also like with of the poem. And sometimes also if you read them all in one go, they talk to each other. Because I'm saying, well, in the first one is set now, and this is coming back. But I'm killing that insect that appeared in the second one, in the sixth one. So, there are family.
Did you keep some sentences intact? But
Yes.
before you changed it, you kept some?
Yes. Just happened.
Yeah, I read the poems in German, I don't really know German. And that's a way of generating stuff. So when I translate anything, I've stopped doing it. It's very rewarding. I'm not very keen on German. But,
So we're gonna end the round table with Richard coming and reading.
Richard, could I request you to help read this final poem? This is poem 199 by Petrov. And in poem 199, what he does is he discovers a glove. He discovers a glove that his late love, Laura, has dropped in the forest. And he looks at that glove and becomes aroused, and by the thought of Laura's fingers filling the glove bits. And so I translated that into a play in which Petrov and his brother discover this glove. So it goes like this. It starts, medieval music, it is dusk in the woods above Avignon. Petrarch and his brother are walking. In the middle of the path they come upon an enormous glove. An enormous glove.
Look at those pearls. They appear to be of oriental hue. He tries to lift it. It is as heavy as a great ball.
Hush. He appears to be listening. Dear glove that covers polished ivory and pressed roses. Who on earth ever saw such a thing?
Not me.
And yet, I recall the necessity of her astonishing fingers. Every night they squeezed my heart tight.
Brother, I believe this blue mother be Laura's. He sighs. It is late, and we are cold. Morning, let us sleep in this.
Would that I had as much of her as the thought of her now naked fingers.
Right. If they are France's, and will never belong to us, and yet for one night
He weeps. But this is theft and must be taken back.
exasperated. Dude, is this a glove or a social event?
Thank you.